Hello, everyone. This is Brian Hunt. Welcome to another episode of Risk On, Risk Off. As for those of you who've been watching these shows pretty regularly, having our show, we talk about risk and all of its different facets. And we have a kind of a focus on construction and real estate, but we also delve into larger systematic risks and also risks that just are inherent part of life. And one of the biggest risks an individual can do is start their own firm or buy a firm and go out on their own, become an entrepreneur. And that can be one of the biggest challenges a person can never think about doing. And you combine that with being an entrepreneur and doing construction, then you're really taking on a very special type of risk, and it's not for everybody. And so I'm excited to have this gentleman on my show to be on the full hour. He's been on my, for those of you might know about me, I started doing these videos actually before Risk On, Risk Off. I do a segment on YouTube called 60 Seconds of Risk. And Joe Flores was one of my earliest guests, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Joe for a number of years here in the North Texas construction community. And when I got the news that he was leaving his old firm, I thought that was a really big decision on his part. I would love to get him on the show. And we had that conversation, which you could find on my YouTube channel. It was really fascinating to sort of delve into his mind as far as to think about his thoughts and why he decided to go off on this endeavor. But I wanted to get him back on the show because it's been almost 2 years since he's been off on his own, starting his, creating remolding a firm in his image. And obviously along that line comes a lot of, trials and tribulations and probably things he didn't know about before he joined on for this venture, but probably would like to have learned. But I think it'd be a great source of information and wealth, knowledge transfer to get him on the show to talk about this and explore what's been going on the past 2 years and what the future might hold. So it's without further ado, I have the distinct pleasure of adding my friend, Mr. Joe Flores. Joe, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's great to have you back on the show. And it's been a pretty interesting journey you've been on the past couple of years. And so I wanted to pick up our conversation, go further down the rabbit hole that we did on our shorter conversation. But for people who don't necessarily know about you, let's take a step back and talk about your background. And to that point, Joe, you're about my age. So if we were to play a modified game of where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, where in the world is Joe Flores right now?
In terms of just my career journey, my professional.
No, yeah, it's just like where are you right now, sitting in your office right now?
I'm in Plano. We are a small to middle market general contractor that dabbles in the automotive industry, retail. We're doing warehouses. We finally got to look at our first lab project, so that's a big step for us, and hopefully that turns into another vertical. But even though it's been almost exactly 2 years since you and I last talked this way, I just hit my 2-year anniversary last week. We're still trying to figure out exactly who we are. The firm was in certain market sectors that were okay, but they weren't what I wanted us to be. So we've opened it wide and have taken this shotgun approach to business. And as opportunities have crossed our desk, we were saying yes a lot more than no to try to figure out what worked for us. And we're now at a point where we're starting to hone in, and we know what works for us. We know we can make money. We know we can provide value for our clients. And we also know where our expertise is at. So that's starting to happen this year. So that's what year 3 looks like for us.
Fantastic, Joe. And great. So let's take a step back for people who don't know about you much. Let's start your early career. So how long have you been living in Dallas now?
So my parents moved us from Los Angeles to Dallas in 1980. So that's how long I've been here.
Okay. And so 1980, do you go to high school here or did you go straight to college?
I did. Yeah, I did go to high school here. I was 11 when we moved here. And so it was a big cultural shift from LA, 80s LA to 80s Dallas. And I've told people a lot of times it felt like we were going back in time. LA had 3 million people. I think Dallas had 700,000 at the time. So it was a big cultural shift. However, having spent the last 45 years here now or so, this is I can't think of a better place to be. Not only professionally, but especially for family.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was born and raised in Irving. I saw it living out there before Las Colinas was even built. And it's amazing the growth the city has seen over the past, like you said, 45 years. And especially, I would say, the past 20. that it just keeps the people keep on coming, and the growth keeps on going in all directions of Dallas, which is probably not a bad place to be doing construction for your career.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
Especially.
So maybe Joe, real quick for people who didn't see our shorter conversation, talk about your experience at Beck as far as what you did there. You were there for a number of years, and then maybe we'll talk towards about your itch to start leaving at some point.
Yeah, was there for almost 28 years, and I can't think of a better place to have started a career and actually built it up. I spent 14 years in operations, and my first project with Beck was the Texas Motor Speedway, so it was a doozy. It was like a dream come true, quite frankly.
Wow. Yeah,
to work on something that was that significant in the community and that large. I mean, by today's standards, that's probably a $250 million job. So it was amazing to start there. But having worked with the people from Beck, I mean, some of the best trained, best values, best principles. It was just an amazing training ground, and kind of worked my way through operations for 14 years. And then Peter Beck got this brilliant idea to pull me into corporate. And I agree with his philosophy, but at the time I thought he was nuts. And so he takes this construction guy, and at the time I was running a $108 million job in Austin. And his philosophy is, I want the people who are delivering corporate services to have an understanding of what our people go through, because the majority of our folks are out in the field.
Yeah.
And so he wanted someone that had lived that to deliver human resources. And so, like I said, I thought he was nuts when he did it, but he put me in charge of human resources, and this would have been back in 2007.
Okay.
And I did that from 07 to 14, and they started adding other functions. I took on safety in the process, and then we restructured a little bit, and I became the chief administrative officer and ran risk, legal, safety. There were a couple of other functions: integration, collaboration. There was a little bit of QA/QC in the mix, and did that nationally, and did that until 2020, 21-ish. And then we restructured again. And Peter had always believed in having someone to not audit the jobs, but go check on things and figure out how to support our people and broker solutions. And so I started doing that there at the end. But what that did is increase the amount of travel. And what a lot of people may or may not know about me, I have 4 children. I have 2 girls, 27 and 25. One married, one about to be married.
Congrats.
Fully launched.
Yeah.
But I also have 2 boys that are 6 and 4.
Oh, wow.
And,
yeah.
Exactly. And so I either get a holy cow or a chuckle out of that. But traveling 2-3 days a week was just not a sustainable thing.
Yeah.
And what I was doing for the company was important, but it was a little easy and a little. I hate to use the word boring, but it was just very simple to do. And so with the travel, with the family situation being where it was at, and me having this desire to go do something more, this opportunity crossed my desk in 22, and Carrie, my wife, could just see my energy increase.
Yeah.
When we were starting to talk about this. And so I started getting deeper and deeper into it, and decided December of 22 that it was just something I wanted to do. But I would not have been in a position to do this had I not worked at Beck.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I have this amazing training and pedigree that I've been able to leverage. And thankfully, because Peter allowed me to do so many things at Beck, it gave me this very broad understanding of the business, not only from an operational standpoint, but also from a corporate and risk standpoint.
Yeah, and I went back and watched our prior conversation before we did this our talk, and just to catch up on what we talked about. And I remember some of the things I specifically asked you about, and just put in context. So 2 years ago, you're a long-standing employee at Beck, but like you said, you're maybe starting to feel like it was boring, or at least you could do it on autopilot. You weren't necessarily being challenged. And so the concept we talked about as far as getting out of your comfort zone, I think was, very much probably going in your head at that time, and what maybe, as I talked about, changing from insurance carrier to broker side was definitely getting out of my comfort zone. But back at the time when you left was, I think about roughly 700 full-time employees approximately.
Yeah, 750-ish.
750-ish.
Yeah.
And hovering around $1 billion in annual revenue, correct?
Right.
Okay. So then 2 years ago, you make the leap and you go to Cooper, and I think we were looking at the numbers. I bet you're also about 25 full-time employees when you had there.
Yeah, when I started, there were 25 employees, and they were generating about $21-ish million worth of revenue.
It's a big difference, a big delta.
Yeah, and at a loss to
and a loss. Okay, so you're jumping into a boat that's got the holes coming into it. So,
yes.
Yeah. So obviously it's a challenge, and I think maybe what we talked about, that was maybe part of the appeal to this, was the challenge. And I think you specifically mentioned that you had your two younger sons. You wanted to show them that you were building something and
correct.
Sort of taking a risk. And the one quote we talked about, which I was really impressed with, I'd like you to expand upon that. You didn't let the fear overcome your desire to take on the risk, because risk is a thing that we talk about a lot in this show, and it happens a lot of ways, whether it be business or politics or economics. It prevents people from maybe reaching their true ambitions, or also going, making their greater abilities being applied. But doing so places you financially at risk, and your family at risk. So can you maybe just talk about that decision when you decided to pull that trigger? I mean, what were the things that were like, yeah, it's just exciting, but like, as someone who's sitting here maybe watching this and seeing about going on their own, maybe explain the emotions you were going through at that process.
Yeah, I mean, there's no dancing around. I mean, fear is a big thing, because you're always, and my nature is to look at what's the worst possible thing that can happen, and then manage my way from there, to figure out what are the things I have to do to keep the worst thing from happening, to happen. Luckily, having spent 28 years at Beck, and developed into an executive, and having been a partner there, I mean, financially speaking, there was some margin for error that I had built up, having a 28-year run there, so that helped.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that really got me over the hump were the friends I had in the industry that I was counseling with, and asking their advice and their thoughts on what they thought about the opportunity, what they thought about transitioning away from a company like Beck, or even if I'd gone somewhere else, someone that was at $1 billion plus and very well established. They were all pushing me toward this. They had their confidence in me, their advocacy in me, and then my wife with Carrie. All of that was really what pushed me over. And so even though I was scared and worried, and I thought, if this doesn't work out, this is what might happen, they gave me enough confidence in myself to actually keep moving forward with this. Awesome. And there's a few other elements. I mean, yes, we're roughly the same age, but I'm living the life of a younger man. And that was another twist to this that made me think, gosh, I mean, I've got, at the time I had a 5 and a 3-year-old, a 4 and a 2-year-old. And I thought, man, the average person that's, got that age kid's probably in their mid 30s nowadays. Yeah. And I thought, well, I'm probably living the life of a, early to mid 30-year-old man. So there's a lot of runway left. There's a lot of margin for error. If something goes wrong, I still have plenty of runway to make corrections if I needed to. And so that was another twist in this that made me say, I'm gonna go ahead and do this.
That's awesome. At this point, I'm going to take a moment for people who are watching the show. You have the ability to submit a question to Joe. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see a picture of me, and the next to is the oval says add a comment. Go ahead and type in your question to Joe and press enter, and it'll show up on my screen. And as long as you keep it clean and PG, I will bring it to Joe's attention. So remember, people, this is a family show. So Joe, let's go back again. So you made the decision. Now, you said something there really kind of interesting that I'd like to explore a bit further. You said you, at least in this process, you didn't say you just did it nilly-willy. You talked to a lot of people. And you maybe ask a lot of questions. And there's the old saying that people say, "Oh, look, luck favors the bold." Well, I say, well, that's going to be true, but it doesn't care too much for the unprepared as well. So go through that process of, and I guess to this point, it wasn't like you're going out on a brand new industry or a brand new sector that you had no experience. You're staying within your lane,
Right.
but you're leveraging your connections and your networks. Can you talk through that? How your network kind of helped you in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate in my life and career to just have made some really solid, developed some really solid friendships. And I'll drop some names later, but I've got friends that have owned businesses, construction businesses. One of my old mentors who I'm still very closely connected to, a guy by the name of Frank English, was my first boss out of school.
Oh, wow.
He owned his own construction firm and it built it up to 80 million plus. And he was part of this what I call internal board of directors that I could go talk to.
Yeah.
Ray Aletta was another individual that I think a lot of your audience may know who that is. He was on this internal board of directors, and just friends like best friends, and counseling and talking to all these folks who they were subject matter experts where I wasn't. Yes, I've got this broad understanding of the construction industry, have lots of relationships. But the fact of the matter is, even though I know a lot about construction and even some of the associated risks, I'd never been a business owner. I'm a rookie in that area. And so I wanted to talk to people who had that proverbial punch in the gut in their careers to help me think about this. And then once we got through that layer, then obviously hiring an attorney to help me analyze the deal, hiring a CPA to get into the numbers, and understanding as much as I could, but also being realistic and I didn't develop this on my own. Being realistic was not developed by myself. It was through advice. Mm-hmm. Stuff's going to happen. You've got this deal. You've gotten into it. You've looked deeply into it. You've analyzed it. However, stuff's going to come out of the cracks. You're going to learn new things that didn't reveal themselves in the sale of the business. And having that preparation was important as well.
Good. Well, I got my first comment, Ed, and this is sort of coming from a Risk On, Risk Off alumni. Dan Sivanow makes a comment, know the spread on having kids and the impact on family. Realizing the strains with the travel is tough. Happy for that change for you. Dan, thanks so much for the comment. You obviously a veteran in the construction industry as well. And that's a big thing, Joe, that I think, especially for me, when I made my change, is the family, is the impact, as far as I was traveling a lot, FN, love the great firm. I was up for promotion, but I'll be traveling more. And my daughters were at that point, they were starting to go to the high school of Booker T. Washington downtown, performing arts. I wanted to be closer. I wanted to see their performances. I wanted to be around. And just being on, going from the 2 to 3 days a week to maybe 3 to 4 days a week, it just didn't have much of appeal to me. So I love the fact that this part of this change was a reflection of, wanting to be around for your family.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's like, all the money in the world is fantastic, but if you're not spending time with your family, then that kind of defeats the purpose of it.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of being an older dad, and I feel like I spent a lot of time with my girls, but looking back, I wish it had been more. There's no doubt about it. And having had that experience, and now that I've launched them, and we have different levels of conversations, adult conversations with each other.
Yeah,
it's allowed me to be way more strategic with my boys because I have a vision of what I want the relationship to be like, and I have a vision of certain milestones, plus or minus. Knowing that that's out there in the future allows me to make decisions now to work toward those, and being able to do this professionally was part of that. I mean, even though there's a lot that's required in owning a business, there is a certain amount of freedom that I have now that I didn't have before.
True. Yeah, you're setting the agenda.
Yep.
Yeah. There's no one else you're reporting to, so there's the benefit of that for sure. So let's kind of walk back 2 years ago. You made the decision. You moved back. You buy the company, and now you've got your hands on this monster.
Mm-hmm.
That is your baby now. Can you talk about maybe what some of the initial issues that were brought to your attention, and maybe initial things you had to address, and then also segue into that, what were some of the things you did not plan for?
Right. It's well, first of all, I mean, I was a little naive in thinking that I wouldn't have to change anything. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. Uh, but it wasn't long after I got here, maybe 30 to 60 days, where I'm going, okay, I've got these three initiatives that were just kept kind of hitting me. Um, there were disputes in place that I was aware of that had to be resolved, and my nature in resolving things was a little bit different than what had been in place before. And so I had this initiative to resolve disputes, get them behind us, make sure we've got the right people, and then go get healthy revenue. When I bought the business, there was only $11 million worth of signed backlog, and it wasn't that healthy in terms of the profitability. But I had a little bit of a runway. But $11 million in this business and the way we were structured at that time isn't going to last a long time.
Yeah, Joe. For one second, maybe people who are watching aren't necessarily sure what you're referring to. And from a construction perspective, can you talk about what a backlog means and how that is important to a construction firm?
Yeah, it's basically. I mean, for us, that was the amount of work that we had under contract that was going to get built and billed in 2023 at that time, and so that's what generates the excess cash, the profit to feed the business and pay the bills, make payroll, invest, and live to fight another day. Um, but the reality of that $11 million is that was only really half of what was needed to keep the business going through 23. And so that one bucket of going and finding healthy revenue was a big one, so that I could own the company longer than 6 months.
So talk about when you first you have to hold the company. What kind of work was the firm doing? What would you say their average projects? What were
the average project size was under 3 million. It was a lot of stick frame stuff. I mean, it was good work. It was feeding the business and providing a living for 25 families. But it was a lot of daycare type stuff, stick built. There were some car washes that I thought was odd. I thought, you drive by these things all the time, at least I used to, and never thought, oh, who's building these things?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought when I first got here that was a part of the business I wanted to shed, but quite frankly, it's one of the things that we're really, really good at. And so I've kept that part of the business. So we were doing car washes, daycares, Montessori schools. There was a little bit of retail, small retail, all under, $3 million.
So it maybe circle for us, Joe. You just made a comment there that people try to understand, but I'd love you maybe peel back the onion a little bit. Car washes. Why are car washes so popular these days?
I asked the same question when I got here. I mean, obviously they make a lot of money or can make a lot of money for the people that own them. But the labor required to build them is not a lot. They can generate $80,000 to $120,000 worth of cash per month.
Mm-hmm.
And because I asked, I go, why are these things not going away? And the previous owner told me there's something about a car wash that even during the recession, people still go wash their cars. It's one of the few things I guess they get to do to feel good about what's going on. And so they've just remained popular. And with this urban sprawl in DFW specifically, they just keep popping up. Now cities are starting to clamp down on these things, and they don't want too many. Like you don't want too many Subways or Starbucks. You don't want too many car washes either.
And I think what people don't realize, the private equity guys got involved because it's a recurring revenue. I mean, especially when these people buy like the monthly pet memberships, it's like recurring revenue that you can build into and count on, which is kind of the attraction of them. So yeah.
And so we've decided to keep them. We completed a project in Grand Prairie a few months ago. It was a $12 million job. I mean, it was a nice size job, and it had probably the nicest car wash in all of Texas. But they're popular. We're good at building them, and so I kept that in the business, and they're good money makers for us. But that was really the book of business. It was very to me, it was very one dimensional. Even though it was in multiple market sectors, and it was very much kind of a one and done type approach. And for us nowadays, it's develop the relationship, find people that are going to build multiple projects, and start working with those versus just the one-offs. So that's one piece of evolution in the business.
That's awesome. So circle back. So 2 years ago, you got obviously right the ship respects to the projects. But maybe if you feel comfortable talking about this, can you talk about writing the ship respects to staff and personnel?
Right. That's probably the toughest thing. When you're dealing with people, again, I was naive in believing that I could run with what was here. But the fact of the matter is, if you have certain principles and values that are going to cascade through the business, which to me is the way it should be. If you own a business, it's your personality that's working through your values, your principles,
Mhm.
and it's inevitable that there's going to be a difference of opinions or a difference of approach. And I quickly got to the point, and inside that 30 to 60-day period, where I could see who were I call them believers and non-believers and how we were going to do
Okay.
business.
Yeah.
And we had to make changes, and not to disparage them, they were very capable people, but from a cultural standpoint, an approach standpoint, and how I felt about clients and people, we had to start making changes. I was very fortunate that after having made changes, that the bucket of believers that I had were some very talented people.
Yeah.
And I had young men and women here that were stepping into roles that were beyond them, but they have flourished. My director of ops, my director of client services, and my chief financial officer. Those are three people that were here when I started, and these guys are operating beyond their years.
Mhm. That's fantastic. So, Joe, it's a big point you hear a lot about as far as culture can be key to the longevity of a firm. But the word culture can be kind of squishy. It's kind of hard to
Yes.
put your hands on it. How would you describe your culture at Cooper, and what is the culture you're trying to develop within the firm?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're only as good as our reputation and our word, and I know that lots of firms, have integrity as a value, but obviously that's a big one for us. And we're not always going to get it right. We're going to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, we endeavor to do the right thing,
Mhm.
even when it hurts.
Yeah.
So from a cultural standpoint, that's massive. Um, Respect is another big one. This is a tough business, and we we I grew up in a way where it was very important to be respectful to anyone you were interacting with. But the flip side of that is expecting respect,
Yeah.
and so that helps us in selecting our clients. And there has to be some level of mutual respect that allows us to operate internally and externally. So that's part of the culture. And the one that surprised me that I've never really have seen anywhere else, I know it's in other places, but I just never paid attention, I think, is grit.
Mhm.
This is not an easy business.
No.
And the smaller the business, the harder it is. I don't care what anyone says. And so grit became part of the culture. And we made some mistakes early on with hiring and not putting enough value or enough weight on that value and making selections. But what we figured out in the last 2 years is that we want people who are tough and resilient and are going to lean into the difficulties that are just natural in this business, believing they're going to overcome them.
And Joe, you make a very good point there, which people maybe necessarily outside of the construction don't necessarily understand when they're thinking about general contractor, hiring a general contractor. I mean, you were director of operations for a very large general contractor in North Texas that has a reach around a lot of the United States. Like we said, 750 full-time employees, $1 billion, and you were chasing projects, or you maybe get chased. You'd actually be invited for projects that a handful of people in the region could do.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go down to a firm of roughly 25 full-time employees, call it 20 million. The scope of things that you could do, obviously, Beck wouldn't chase.
Right.
So, but now you're in a sort of a lower level of the ladder, for lack of a better term. There's a lot more of the people out there trying to chase and do what you're trying to do. I mean, and I think people don't understand that there is a lot of firms out there who are trying to do the same work you're doing, especially
Right.
here in North Texas.
Yeah. I would argue that in the large market, there are probably more players in the DFW area now than there ever have been. So I think the competition at that level has gotten stiffer for sure. But to your point, down here in this ecosystem, there are a lot more. But what I've discovered in how we're approaching business, we're kind of in this middle ground. So we now have expertise in house to do a $20 million project that wasn't here 2 years ago, and so we're kind of migrating out of this $3 million range toward the $20 million range. But there's a zone in there where large players are unable or unwilling to come down to. And then some of these family-owned mom and pop type businesses, which are great businesses, by the way, are unable to or unwilling to go into this zone that we're now finding ourselves in, where we're doing, $5, $7, $10 million jobs or proposing on $13 million jobs. That's an interesting zone where we're not going up against tons of people, and in many cases, and we've gotten much better at this, we're the only ones talking to clients. And so it's it was dog eat dog when I got here, but we're starting to kind of get out of that.
And I think that makes a very good point. From what I've kind of learned working with clients in various sizes, there is sort of that maybe a long runway, but then not every firm has the ability to get to that next level because it's whether it be a combination of things, right? People, systems, but also I think part of it is financial performance and whether or not a company is a good steward of their resources or not. Would you talk about, we were talking about prepping for this conversation. Would you talk about the importance of cash in construction?
Yes, very much so. This shows you how, we always hear the term cash is king. But up until years ago, it was kind of just, whatever. Even though it was important at where I used to work, obviously, the margin for error is a lot bigger, in my opinion. The capital that a company like Beck holds on to is just drastically different. And so that was a punch to the face when I got here. And when we were changing our work and then changing the way we do our work, honoring our obligations is amazingly important to me. Well, to be able to do that, you have to be pulling in revenue and then using that cash to pay bills and pay trade partners and honor all those obligations. And it quickly became apparent to me that the way cash was being monitored was insufficient. So there were too many surprises early on. And for a guy who had never done this, when you hear, hey, we might have a cash problem, all I think about is, what do I have to sell? Do I got to sell a house? What do I do? Because I'd never done this before. And I gained this very abrupt appreciation for cash. And I feel silly not having known that, but that's just that's how it was for me. And so we got better and better at managing it. And our radar for looking at what this was going to look like 30, 60, 90, and even a little bit out to 120 days allows us to, put the throttle down on going and winning work. Maybe not investing in something today, but we invest in it when things look more certain. Everything kind of revolves around that concept, but if you don't have an understanding of what it looks like out in the future, you're running blind. But it's a big deal, and it's caused us to be conservative. We now have a threshold that we won't go below, just to make sure that if something hit the fan, that we're in a position that we've got some flexibility to operate.
Yeah. No, I think that's in my observation, in my side of the fence, where I'm working with clients like you and various sizes. The key thing I think owners don't realize, and you see this a lot too many times, is that you hit success, you get the big project, and an owner is like, he's been struggling and working hard and sacrificed, but once they made that big project, then they immediately pull money out to buy that ranch, buy that sports car, whatever, thinking, oh, now this can be happy times from here on. And unfortunately, sometimes treat their checking account, their company's checking account like their own personal checking account.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the things go bad, like you kind of lose you to, I mean, you're not going to sell the car for what you paid for. You're going to take a loss. You're going to take just when you have to sell things, you don't get the price you want.
Right.
And there's a gentleman who's been on my 60 Seconds of Risk, who I think Lloyd Osborne over at Nobel Builders. He has a quote talking about sandbagging for the zombie apocalypse,
Yes.
which I think is the key thing, is being conservative with your cash.
That's 100% right.
Yeah. So again, everybody who's joined the conversation late, talking to Joe Flores, owner of Cooper General Contractors. If you'd like to have a question for Joe, look at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You see my picture where there should be a note that says add a comment. Please type in your question, and I'll be happy to bring to Joe's attention as long as it's appropriate. So, Joe, so now you're 2 years into this. You've been I've got to know some of your staff and your personnel and seen the efforts you've done to turn things around. What is in being in Texas in North Texas is a good place to maybe do construction, because it seems like there's always something new around the corner. As you think about, you got to look at obviously what you're worried about the next quarter, but if you think about the next 5 years, what is your vision for the firm over the next 5 years, and what are some of the things that it's going to require you to do to maybe reach those goals?
Yeah, I mean, from I've got to start with people, and so if I want to continue to create opportunity for our people, to me, it's inevitable that I have to grow the firm. Because at some point in time, there's only so much vertical growth that you get out of a firm that's static or stagnant. And so I know that I have to grow it to continue to create vertical opportunities for the people that we bring on board, because I want them to stay as long as they can. So that's important. What does the growth look like? I mean, obviously we don't want to get out over our skis. I think given where we're at right now, 20 to 25% of growth year over year is probably enough. Now, it depends on what that looks like. Is it just revenue growth, or is it the number of projects? And so we have to figure out what that formula looks like. But certainly growing the company. I have no intention of growing the reach. DFW's plenty. We've got 13 counties, and we're coming up on 8 million people. I think there'll be plenty to go around. I think from a market sector, I certainly want to expand from where we're at. That's why this first lab job that we've proposed on is so important, because I want to make sure that we have an opportunity at what I would call maybe not necessarily leading edge industries, but industries that are going to continue to be funded and be important in the area. So, I mean, healthcare, life sciences at obviously a very small scale is going to be important to us. I still think brick and mortar retail is not going to go away. Every time we go further north or east or west, there are major intersections that need retail, that need car washes, that need gas stations and convenience stores. That's going to continue to be part of who we are. I mean, we're good at it now, so we want to keep doing that. There's, I mean, municipal is starting to become a part of what we want to do, just to kind of dampen the volatility. I mean, if private seems to slow down, municipal seems to be going strong anyway. So we're developing some expertise there. We're on the verge of getting our first project with the city of Dallas, a nice size one design build. We'll get a rep there, and I think we'll do well. And if that is in fact the case, then I want that to continue to be a part of who we are. And then some of the staples. I mean, if there's some higher ed stuff that we're able to do that's in that 20 million under, we want to start dabbling in that, but that's probably further out. But the fundamental piece in driving going into any of those market sectors or growing is to provide the opportunity for our folks.
Awesome. Well, kind of related to that, we have a question that came back in from Dan. How do you weigh gut feeling of a person and their grit versus the resume language as you hire? I'm struggling with that balance. So it's a good point. So obviously you get maybe someone's attention brought to you because of the resume,
Mhm.
and you bring them in for the interview. But then in your analysis, Joe, how relevant is the resume versus the individual you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, the resume obviously gives us a baseline for some the technical background, and I think it's pretty easy to kind of vet most of that out when you meet someone. The grit part is really hard. I would love to tell you that we figured it out. You could come up with scenarios and have them tell you stories about things that they've overcome or that they felt that they used grit to deal with. But like I said, we've made mistakes with people, and I think we're getting better. But you don't know until you put them in the seat. Has been the way we've operated. I would love to tell you that, man, if you ask these 3 questions, you get to the bottom of it and it's all done.
Yeah.
I will tell people, when I ran human resources at Beck, there was a lot of data that said you could throw names in a hat that had the technical expertise you wanted and pick any name out, and you were just as likely to pick out a winner as you were going through any interview process. Until someone is in the seat and they get challenged or have to go through something, you just don't really know.
Yeah, that's true. You really don't know. And to that point, though, Joe, I'm curious because it goes back to I tell people like insurance and construction are very similar in the sense that they're big industry, but everybody knows each other,
Mhm.
and it's highly incestuous. When it comes to your staff and looking for personnel, I mean, I'm curious how much success have you had because of your network in the construction world, as far as someone's referred someone to you, or
Mhm.
if you get someone you looks interesting, you're able to call someone, hey, did you work with this guy? What do you think?
That's been very beneficial. I was talking to a few other guys. We were talking about how I got here, and the one thing that I didn't put the right sort of value, but I also didn't understand the quality of where it was at. What was the network I had? I had inadvertently, that none of this was strategic, none of it was deliberate. I had inadvertently built up this really cool and nice network of associates and new friends. And when I left where I was at, it everyone just came out of the woodwork, and so that definitely has helped not only with people and making connections with potential teammates,
Yeah.
but also on the work. We're getting connected to work now because of these relationships. And by the way, my director of client services, Chris Siebert, that dude is he just latches on to my relationships and he takes them to a whole nother level.
Fantastic.
And so that's worked out really well. But to your point, the network has been incredibly valuable. And you're right, this is a very tiny industry.
No, I've actually had the good pleasure of seeing Chris and get to know him and see him in action. He's a pretty dynamic individual. I think
He absolutely is. He's ours.
Yeah. Very good. So, Joe, I mean, I want to keep conscious of your time. So, so being now you've done this for 2 years now, as far as with this company, if someone's out there watching this and thinking they want to jump the shark and do the same thing,
Mhm.
what would you say, or maybe the top 3 things they need to understand or really get their hands around as they think about making this big jump?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which approach. I mean, I did entrepreneurship through acquisition, and so I created a seat that way versus entrepreneurship through, creation from scratch. I think those are 2 different models. But the one thing that I think is true about either of those models, if you haven't done it before, it is going to be so much harder than you can imagine.
Mhm.
Now, despite that difficulty, I also believe it's probably the most fulfilling thing you will ever do.
Yeah.
But it is so. But in my case, and through this acquisition path, it's going to be really, really hard. You're going to have to make very difficult decisions. You have got to develop resilience, and you've got to have an amazing amount of flexibility. But the other thing that kind of keeps me going, I mean, just faith is a big thing.
Yeah.
but knowing and believing that no matter what obstacle or what issue has been presented to us, we're going to overcome. We're good enough, we're smart enough, we have enough friends in the industry that can guide us through these things, and you're going to overcome them. It is a leap of faith. I had, whether it was right or not or wrong, I had enough confidence in myself that I believed I could do this. So you have to have some belief, and it is a leap of faith because you don't know what's gonna happen. I know that's a lot to respond to the question, but there's so much wrapped into making a decision like this. And have a backup plan. And I'm not talking about a backup plan to exit. I'm talking about a backup plan in case things don't go right.
Yeah.
And like I said, having been in the industry long enough and having had a wonderful career back, I was in a position where I felt like I had enough of a backup plan that if things didn't go right, I could weather that storm and keep going.
Joe, I think you just touched on some point. I think it's the key thing for a lot of when it comes to risk, whatever it be, running your company or starting a company or even just, planning for your retirement, whatever the case it is. The key thing is not everything goes the way you can work hard, you do everything you possibly can, but you got to be realistic in the sense that, sometimes things do go wrong. Maybe sometimes outside your control, black swan events, hurricanes, forest fires, whatever the case would be, supply chain disruptions. You can have the best plan in the world, and you do everything actually you possibly can, but sometimes it just goes wrong. And having that backup plan is not signaling that you're going to fail, or it's some people say, well, it's the power of positive thinking. You should never think about failing. Well, no, it happens. And especially if you've got families and loved ones that you depend upon you, it does take someone to responsibly to sit down and think, okay, this may not go the way I planned it to. What's the backup plan?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's why we buy auto insurance, right?
Yeah.
I don't believe I'm going to get into a car wreck, but just in case.
Well, that's why I put my seatbelt on too.
Yeah. There was another element that I didn't mention earlier, and that's in doing this, going and being an entrepreneur, the level of commitment that you have to have. It actually has to be absolute. You have to commit to the deal completely, and the reason I say that is because early on, when things got a little rough, there were some moments where you start to feel sorry for yourself. And you're going, hold on a sec. This is a long-term play. I'm committed to this. I have these families that are counting on me. I've got my family that's counting on me. I'm not doing this just for myself. I'm doing this for everyone else. You got to lean into it and keep pushing through. And to me, that has a level of commitment that is pretty significant.
That's fantastic. Well, Joe, I mean, obviously this has been a great conversation, but before I let you go, I want to ask a couple questions. So when you're not working, what are you doing?
Right now, my boys are a load. That doesn't mean I don't try to get away for a round of golf or go shooting and stuff like that. Or go to one of my wife's many favorite restaurants, or do a little bit of traveling. We do all those things, but Jackson and Joseph are a load, and they don't walk anywhere in the house. They run everywhere.
Yeah.
And no matter what I'm doing, they're on my hips. So I have to plan 3x the amount of time for any chore or task around the house. But I would not trade it for the world. I don't care that it takes 3 times as long. They're on my hip, and we love hanging out together. So hanging out with the family is a big thing.
All right, so you ended the allusion to something. So if somebody's sort of relatively new to Texas or more Texas than looking to come, you mentioned restaurants. What's you and your wife? What's your top 2 or 3 restaurants?
It depends. So is it the Momo? Now I go to where my wife tells me. By the way, so my favorite restaurants are the ones that she told me are my favorites.
Okay, very good.
There's a local one, Alfonso's, that is there in Old Lake Highlands that we love.
Okay.
When we go up to Knox Street, we go to the Porch. That's another favorite of ours. from a burger joint, good friend. It's where we went when we were dating. These are East Dallas joints, by the way.
Yeah.
So places like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't get to eat at any franchise place. I haven't had Pizza Hut in years. So I only get gourmet stuff now.
Amen. And then from a travel perspective, where are your favorite go-to spots?
Well, that's so she loves the beach. I love the mountains.
Okay.
Which means that the inverse is true. She doesn't necessarily like the mountains, and I can't stand the beach. So we have to we alternate. But Colorado's a staple for us.
Good.
Destin is a staple for us. Last year we compromised. We went to Boyne City in Michigan, which had we were on the water and in the woods at the same time. So both of us got what we wanted.
Nice.
But anywhere where we can disconnect and let the boys run around and spread out and just be at peace and just relax and unwind. That's what we go try to do.
Well, I was just in Breckenridge last weekend, getting a little skiing in, and it was great conditions. Under the fact it was painfully cold. It was like -17 at night, and during the day, the highs were like 7. And that was before you got on the mountain with the wind chill. So it was it was an effort to get back up and on that lift every day. But
that's gonna be us later this year.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, Joe, hey, thanks so much for your time. This has been a great conversation. I think anybody who's going to watch this is going to learn a lot from this, especially if someone's looking to go on the ledge and do the big dive like you did. So once again, Joe, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate your input.
Thank you very much. This was fun.
Thank you. All right, everybody. So that's another episode of Risk On, Risk Off. I hope you found this enjoyable. Like I said, taking the risk is one of the biggest things people can do, whether it be, starting a career path, different career, new company, or even starting your own firm. It's a lot of risk. But as I think, Joe and I chatted about what he said in the past, I think the big thing is, don't let the fear get in the way of you benefiting. So don't let the fear block you from taking the risk. So words to live by, and I think we could all benefit from that. Try to get outside our comfort zone if we want to pursue our goals or improve the quality of our lives. So like all things, guys, I hope you found this show enjoyable. If there's a certain topic or individual you'd like to see, please post me a note here on LinkedIn, or you can post. You can find this video as well on YouTube and post a note there if any questions or comments or any suggestions. Always welcome. So until next time, guys. Bye.